It's time for another episode of Off the Record, On the Rocks. Join Michael Toner and Ankarino Lara as we discuss the latest in all things Web3. Tune out the noise and turn up the signal as we pour ourselves into the future. Better make mine a double.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another Off the Record, On the Rocks with my good friend, Mr. Ankarino Lara. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing fantastic, Michael. It's the dead of summer. And that means that the government's moving and shaking and trying to do so in a quiet way.
It is deep in August. You are absolutely right. If you're not paying attention, somehow or another, these legislators on Capitol Hill, they work through the summer. They work the weekends now. We're getting some interesting news about Coinbase and PayPal coming out with some heavy hitting, we're going to launch our own layer 2 crypto stable coin tokens. I mean, I think PayPal one really broke through in the past week. We got more news coming from the SEC trying to make some decisions on these Bitcoin ETFs. What is this going to mean for my BlackRock 401k? I got a lot of questions. And what is going on with AI? I've said it before and I'll say it again. AI. So hot take on SEC, some still movement here on Capitol Hill, and the fact that you've got PayPal and Coinbase launching the equivalent of stable coins. What is this?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like there's two conversations coming out of the same people's mouths, but they're two different sides. And everybody is against each other, but they're also with each other, because Coinbase famously was ordained by the feds, the SEC, to become a real traded stock, become the darling. But then they keep getting sued. They just continue to keep getting sued for these different products. So this new product that broke through to me for at least for Coinbase, and then we'll go to PayPal, is Coinbase figured out a way to disintermediate themselves and launch something called Base.
Yeah.
They took the word coin out. Because if you're any normal human and you hear the word Coinbase, well, obviously it must be about cryptocurrency. But if it's just called Base, well, there's no coins in there. And so somehow you're able, via this thing called Base, to kind of change the way that they both either back or they transact their different, products. So that's kind of a weird little nuance, but it basically means that further, they continue to launch something called Coinbase Ventures, which is an arm of Coinbase, which, quote, invests. But in this case, they just went out and bought a whole bunch of altcoins. Something called Rocket Pool. They just went to the shitcoin casino and spent almost $1 million.
Let's come back to the shitcoins, because let's focus on the fact that Coinbase, publicly traded company, anointed by the SEC as a crypto exchange for the last several years, they have been allowing their customers to transact in Bitcoin, in Ethereum. They have been compliant. They got essentially blessed in these ETF applications from BlackRock, from ARK Ventures. Coinbase was the blessed surveillance partner. Let's come back to that, right? The moment you listed Coinbase as the surveillance partner, BlackRock, we'll run your Bitcoin ETF to the front of the line. I'm pushing that all the way through to, yes, they just launched their own layer 2. When you say in how they back transactions versus how they transact in transactions, it makes me think back to banking crises of years past, where all of a sudden banks were being held to stress tests. That the Fed wanted to come in and say, do you have enough cash if this scenario? And they would play down literally the stress test of, if there's a run on a bank, do you have enough to back it? And now here's Coinbase, anointed as a publicly traded company, transacting in crypto, now launching Base as what feels very similar to an XRP of, we're going to use this to provide speedier transactions between, whether that's peer-to-peer, I want to PayPal you, now we come to PayPal, also launching their own stablecoin. So all of that, fast forward to the SEC has an August 13th deadline. We are recording this on August 12th. It will be up by August 14th. So unless there's a Sunday night massacre, the only thing we've seen out of the SEC sort of responding to this whole thing is they have now denied one of the Bitcoin ETFs, only that of ARK, Cathie Wood's original Bitcoin ETF, hitting a deadline here. I just unloaded a lot. So give me your reaction. Coinbase, PayPal, stablecoins, and SEC decisions?
Well, yeah, the timing of it is interesting, right? Because if you're PayPal and you just saw Coinbase, who is ordained, get sued now multiple different ways, and you are a company that owns Venmo, you were a company that was originally started by Elon Musk. There's a lot of people from that world who went on to create beautiful products that sold for millions of dollars,
PayPal
including
Mafia.
the PayPal Mafia started YouTube. Let's not forget that as well. Like everyone went off to go do great things. So they feel comfortable enough that this week, in advance of an SEC decision happening on Sunday. So let's just assume that nobody knows what the SEC's decision is going to be on Sunday. Let's just assume nobody knows, because of course they haven't decided, so no one should know. But if that's true, it would be very bold to be a massive company like PayPal and come out and not only launch your own new cryptocurrency, but to call it effectively a stable coin, pegging it to, quote, your own profits, meaning the money that they take in from end users. And I want to say it's called what, PYPAL? It's like PYUSD, which when I always read that, the first thing I think of is PSYOPs, because I see the PY. It's missing the S.
Yes.
But the PYUSD. But we know, if you're the smart money, if you're following the smart money, that no one makes an accidental press release, right? So they know, like we know, that no government SEC official is making any decision on Sunday, any direction about the the Bitcoin ETF. They're going to kick the can because, as we just recently reviewed, Bloomberg has printed out just right off the console of SEC activity for each of the eight ETFs, of which ARK is one and BlackRock is one, Galaxy Digital and others. And that is the first decision date is the 13th of August. However, there are already listed future decision dates for the second and the third and final. So if we all know that that's not going to be a real decision, then a perfect time to come out and say, hey, we're PayPal, and now we're competing with the U.S. government with their dollar, and we're competing with Ripple, and we're competing with Tether, and we're competing with FedNow, and we're competing with anybody who offers you a version of the American dollar that isn't actually the American dollar itself. So that thing, to me, that says they know something we don't. And I think they have a strong position because no one's going to say anything to them until at least next year.
I want to get something on the record, and it's one of those things where it's you and I this week, we're recording on a Saturday, which is a little bit off for us, but we were looking for a Friday Night Massacre. As we were planning for the show, one of our exchanges, you were talking about, this is Thursday, I'm looking at date stamps, 305. I got screenshots, I got receipts. How about BlackRock, quote, gets provisional, quote, first BTC ETF as a weird institutional test before the end of the year than everyone else in February, right at the halvening. The next morning, Friday, where we would normally record, this is when the SEC dropped its first piece of news to say that they were basically going to delay the decision here on this Bitcoin ETF application, and only delay the 21 shares in the ARK Cathie Wood's fund, not the BlackRock. So when you call BlackRock gets provisional first, I'm now looking at the deadlines. This is already in motion. By the way, the SEC is kicking the can on the Ripple case we got to get to and what this means there. But this is a start your engines, look at 2024, follow the legislation, follow the SEC, follow the enforcement, and this timeline is being laid out. And then we put a pin in Coinbase not only launching their base, PayPal launching their PSYOPs coin, but Coinbase Ventures saying, fuck you, and investing in Rocket Pool via Ripple token purchase, CB Ventures gambling in the shitcoin casino for maybe the last time, getting that last dice roll in. what do you say?
I mean, so when you start looking at the way these dates are lining up, first, if you have the government's ear, Fink, member, the CEO of BlackRock, he's been out screaming and yelling about Bitcoin, digital gold. Cathie, is it Wood? ARK Investments, these guys, these are kind of small time non-government friends, right? Kathy, ARK Investments is no BlackRock. Now, she may have had an ETF application in early, but unfortunately, as the tea leaves were read, it doesn't actually matter how early you are because there are certain rules and nuances that you don't appreciate, which apparently they didn't have the right. I don't know, maybe they didn't have the right surveillance partners listed. Maybe whatever it was about her application, it wasn't perfect. And so they timed it to punt it just out to the new year. And so when you look at that and as these things line up, when you have Coinbase and PayPal, now that Coinbase, just to go back to the Rocket Pool purchase, they go to the shitcoin casino, but the coin or the token that they buy almost $1 million of, or actually, sorry, it was an undisclosed amount, is the call sign RPL, which I think people might confuse for Ripple
I
because it's
definitely thought
written
that.
RPL, but
Definitely
RPL
thought
is
that.
actually Rocket Pool because Ripple's coin is XRP. So it's not all it's like doubly confusing. So I think most casual people looking at that would be like, "Oh, look, they're involved with Ripple too." It's like, well, it's not exactly that. But again, like if
Sure
under
feels that way.
normal circumstances, the SEC would come and say, "You are getting sued, and we're going to fine you for acquiring a whole bunch of shitcoins." It might as well be Doge or Pepe coin. It's just any random token. But apparently they can't because they call themselves ventures. So I don't know how BlackRock is organizing itself, but I know BlackRock has so many different arms of its apparatus, and one of them is like paramilitary, and then one's over here. Maybe one of their arms is also called BlackRock Ventures, and they're using that arm to go through to get this ETF. The point is, they're going to get it first because they have more than $1 trillion under management, and they are literally an apparatus of the government and probably loan the U.S. tons of money, and everyone else is going to get second.
Well, I
And,
think
and
the
and when they
signal
do,
here is the SEC blocking one of the applications, not all of them. That's the first signal to pay attention to. Then the fact that the next application is the BlackRock application. The other thing I think that is important here is that we are in the dead of August. What we are talking about here, you got to be following SEC news to see these enforcement actions because there's a lot of smoke signals going up. There's a lot of their distractionary flares being sent out, including this double fine from both the SEC and
the CFTC.
Gensler's former employer, CFTC, which he once reminded us about his resume, double finding the SEC and the CFTC going after these banks, big banks, Wells Fargo, for using private messaging apps. That's happening in real enforcement, real-time enforcement, those banks paying fine. And then what is Gensler out there in the media screaming? We've now heard it 3 times. AI will be the next big problem in the markets. It will be the cause of the next financial disaster. I mean, Chicken Little screaming, the sky is falling. And meanwhile, I'm fining Wells Fargo on the back end for using Signal because they were trading shitcoins without telling us. I mean, that's what's happening.
Yeah, and not only that, they're fining the Wall Street giants for use of protected and encrypted chat apps. They listed Signal, WhatsApp, and one other
It's an
in
important point.
basically a 3-year window. It was specifically talking about between 2019 and today, which is specifically the window of what we all know, who will remember was really the beginning of COVID-19, right? The 19 meaning 2019 COVID-19 to today, where it's in the rearview mirror, and we all know what happened during that time. Let's see. We had a really amazing story about the rise and fall of the NFTs in those markets, and people on stage on television giving them out, and people screaming about how they're worth $250,000. You had the rise and the fall of famous tech companies, including Voyager, Terra Luna, and ultimately FTX. And even Sam Bankman-Fried's back in the news, still trying to get in or out of jail or fines
Come
or
back to
whatever's
that one.
happening. Come back to that one. And then number 3, it was also that era when we had the rise and fall, and I guess rise again, of the meme stock era, where there was a moment in time when AMC and GameStop were being utilized and squeezed by these Reddit board folks who like flash mobbed purchasing and shorting and buying and leveraging. But then on top, you back even out from that, it was also a time when Robinhood, who was sort of the, I guess, sort of the darling equivalent of the FT. If FTX is to crypto, Robinhood was to traditional stock markets, right? Remember, Robinhood just miraculously would shut off access to its services for long periods of time, explaining how servers were overloaded. And eventually they probably paid some kind of fine. I forget actually what happened to Robinhood people. But the point is all of that stuff I just said happened in a 3-year window. And the SEC said, hey guys, all y'all got rich. All y'all got rich with your secret little deals, all your secret conversations that you're not allowed to have. So we're just going to guesstimate that the SEC is owed like $500 million for the unpaid taxes and blah 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 rules and fines that you probably would have garnered in the last 3 years.
Good guesstimate.
And they just came in and they just paid it. They were just like, okay, here's the money. So talk about establishing a precedent. So now what you're saying is, if the SEC were to say go after, oh, I don't know, Kathy Wood from ARK Investments and look at her hidden WhatsApp conversations for the last 3 years, well, gosh, what if we slap Kathy Wood with a fine for $200 million? Would she pay it? Maybe. I mean, it's starting to establish that they can just go down the row and hit all the people. I mean, just because you're filing for a Bitcoin ETF, just ask Brian Armstrong and Coinbase. Just because you're friends with the SEC and the government doesn't mean they're not going to come find you. That to me shows that they're flexing power. They haven't even gone into the insider trading aspect. They're just talking about usage of encrypted apps. That's it.
It is drawing attention, though. I mean, that's what I'll say, is that not only are we drawing attention to it, this is drawing attention on Capitol Hill, legislators questioning whether Gary Gensler is overstepping power granted to him by the Constitution and by the Congress and by the law. And if it's not granted to him and he's claiming it, I do like to think that the government will flush that out. In the meantime, you are now seeing private enterprises flex their arm. You're seeing, Base launch their coin, PayPal launch their coin, BlackRock, the biggest asset manager, looking for this Bitcoin ETF. I mean, that means that your 401k can and will have exposure to crypto markets. I mean, you can't underline that enough. People don't want to talk about crypto. What's crypto? Oh my gosh, shitcoin casinos. We're joking about this stuff. But at the end of the day, we're talking about the world's largest asset manager looking for approval from government regulators to play the game, to pay the Pied Piper, to pay the federal government, whatever fines, whatever rules, whatever regulation we got to follow. We're going to do it because we want to make money off of these 401ks that we can trade now in a fast-paced market with instant transaction, cross-border, permissionless cryptocurrencies. And that's where you got to understand the technology. I know I just went in a completely different tangent, but it's an
important tangent because you got to follow the money. Let's remember, these are moves that are being made by mostly they're all either elected or appointed officials. In the case of the SEC, he's appointed, not elected. So you and me and everyone else, we didn't vote for Gary Gensler, right? He just was appointed the same way Jerome Powell runs the Fed and that's and we're hyper wound up about it, even though all of this rulemaking and decision making applies to about, if you take the U.S. total population at 300 to 320 million, let's just say it affects about half of those people who are of age to be buying and selling these kinds of things anyway. So we're making all of this hullabaloo for like 150 million people on this planet. And maybe other countries are going to take the lead on the kind of regulation, but this is basically deciding how the richest Americans and any rich foreigner is able to play within our system. And those guidelines, if they're not established, then they don't exist, then you can't actually make the money. And the government's in the business of making money. And so I think about article that just hit this morning. The article that just hit this morning is like, okay, well, if you just described how we're going to FedNow make the transaction speed go lightning fast, because if the government has been so good at using 7-day and 3-day automated clearinghouse rules and still being able to triage and find ways to make money off of that within that protracted, timeline, if you go to an instant timeline, well, you can see how you can actually move a whole lot more money from institutions and retail investors a lot faster. How fast? How much could we make is what they're thinking. And then the next question always comes to my mind, and this might be jumping ahead, is, well, in November, when everybody who decides to run for office is going to have to file the disclosures, have to show they've earned as much money as required to start a campaign in the US, because now you actually have to have enough money to run for office. You can't run if you don't have enough. So you already have to be rich, or at least backed by someone who's rich. And that's going to come in November. And all of that will have to then have regulation in place. And just this morning, the California Fair Political Practices Commission, never heard of them, the FPPC, this morning updated its campaign disclosure manuals. This morning, Saturday. And it outlines
Working the
campaign
weekends,
contribution limits, limited liability company disclosure requirements, payment reporting, cryptocurrency contributions,
yes,
quote, excessive contributions, and on and on and on. And that comes today. So they've updated their manuals already. Do you think they're going to update their manuals again before November? Or do they already have the playbook?
I got to try to connect a lot of dots here, right? Because I'm coming all the way from the SEC, Gary Gensler shouting AI, black box trading, these algorithms, programmatic trading, the fact that Gensler is saying this is going to lead to a financial crisis. If you and I had access to an AI bot that could go out and trade money for us and make money for us by trading in an instant market every day, every minute, every second, 24 hours, 365, and you could program it, then you can program that bot to be profitable. The SEC wants to regulate all of that. Then you've got them kicking the can on the Ripple case. And I'm getting to the timeline here, but then you've got California. When we think of regulation, we think about Privacy Act, came from the UK, who was the first state to implement, big privacy, data privacy with CCPA, and what California did with email, privacy and social media privacy. And now here they are with updating regulation for crypto donations to candidates. Right when this regulation is coming through Capitol Hill, the regulators are getting situated, the BlackRocks of the world are now transacting in it, and those holding those currencies are now going to have an instant mechanism with which to support their candidates. So thank you, California, because now every other state will now need to spread this new clause, this new there'll probably be 3 deadlines. There'll be a committee hearing. Somebody will comment period. Then it'll go to another deadline, then a final approval. And here we go as we round out Q4, heading into Q4 2023, setting us up for presidential elections, setting us up for Bidenomics. We can talk about what this means for your wallet and what the economy will be doing. And you said it, smart money and the dumb money movie launch. We got to get to it. So take me all the way through this. It's a lot of dots.
That's a lot of dots. I mean, and maybe the dots that are kind of the gray dots with the dotted lines, like you just opened with, are the AI conversation that's being screamed. Because usually when someone who's important is screaming in the news about something, they're trying to distract you from what's really happening, right? We went from literally everything leading up to this about everything cryptocurrency and everything legislation, everything Bitcoin ETF and everything presidential election and all the money that's behind the scenes and how the government's going to control and regulate and tax. But then he's not, and the office of the SEC is not talking about any of that. They just are screaming.
We can get to that later, he said.
They're like that the next financial catastrophe will be AI driven. So it's almost like one of these things where either A, is the financial catastrophe already happening? You're just letting us know, so you're covering yourself because it's barreling towards a moment where AI is going to be blamed, or is it B, that there is going to be a financial catastrophe, a black swan event will occur, and no matter what it is, I'm going to blame it on AI. There could be 2 outcomes there. It could be a fait accompli, right? Everyone would think like, well, what's the black swan? Well, it was Trump. It wasn't. What was the black swan? Well, it was the war in Ukraine. Well, maybe. What was the black swan? Like all these things. Like, well, next time, how about it's just AI? And then and I already said enough of it leading up to it. So when it happens, you'll believe me when I say it. So the bad part too, honestly, somebody got in his ear. Somebody whispered to him and was like, dude, 25 years ago, me and my roommates were running a black box algorithm and we had a hedge fund. That was AI. Someone got in his ear and just whispered something like that, and he started thinking, "Wait a second, I have roommates in college. In fact, I knew guys at MIT named Sam Bankman-Fried and Caroline Ellison, and they were running a black box algorithm in their room, and all it's doing is triaging these bot sales, like you said. Everyone, or to our listeners, the way these black boxes work is when after hours markets trading started, when you could trade 24 hours a day, you create little bots that would just buy and sell. And oftentimes they're competing against each other. And if you can buy and pop a price and sell and short a price and do it fast enough, then you can kind of triage money off the market. And it's something that literally I have friends who they wrote this and worked with me at a company in San Francisco and just on the side had a black box algorithm running. I never thought of it as AI, but of course that's what it is. So now Gary Gensler is like, well, we got to shut all that down because apparently all these retail investors are making a bunch of money. They're not paying.
But
So
this,
put that aside for a second.
yeah, go.
That's the smart money. That's the
Yeah,
dumb money.
that's where I want to get to.
So now you think we heard this whole story. The SEC just fined a whole bunch of Wall Street guys $500 million for talking on Signal and on WhatsApp about stocks and about cryptocurrencies, and they paid $500 million. Now let's just talk about the timeline coming out of the summer. There's a movie coming out. The movie's a Hollywood production. It's a high profile, lots of big name actors, profile study of the Robinhood meme stock craze. And the YouTube influencer, I'm not going to go into the whole the narrative of the story if you haven't seen it, it's coming on the 22nd of September. And the movie is called Dumb Money because the whole point of the film is the dumb, stupid billionaires tried to squeeze the meme stock guys. They lost billions a day, while the meme stock guy made like millions a day and became this internet hero. Now, we won't spoil the whole story, but of course, the government and billionaires don't like that. But the point is that the little guy, the little David, can go up against the Goliath and win the dumb money. Now, anyone I think seeing that promotion would think the dumb money was the billionaires. But I would say that it's actually us, the retail investors, because we're going to be sold this story leading right into the fall
Buy a little
that the
Bitcoin.
little guy can buy a Bitcoin, buy a Ethereum, buy a stock, and you have a way to beat the system. You can beat Wall Street. But here's the thing: the only way you can get the Bitcoin after you watch the movie is to go get a BlackRock ETF, and the BlackRock ETF is going to be fixed at a price. It isn't going to swing wildly.
It's not Bitcoin.
It's
Let's
not
just be
Bitcoin.
clear. It's not
a piece
Bitcoin.
Of
It's an
paper that
ETF.
says you have some
backed
Bitcoin backed by, which is, and just for all our listeners who don't know, all that ETF stands for is an exchange traded fund. It's Bitcoin as a stock ticker that you can get some of. So to me, it just says we're going to grease the wheels. We're going to butter everybody up. So what happens September 22nd? Movie comes out called Dumb Money, which lets the little guy beat the big guy. Perfect. What comes just before Thanksgiving? Full regulation as to how, well, apparently California already knows, but how you can donate money, including crypto, to your favorite congressperson or senator or presidential candidate. And then when they kick Ripple out into April and you kick Cathie Wood and ARK out until at least January, February, what does that put you at? It actually puts you right on the 15th of January, Monday, Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, which we've said now for years on this show, is the day after.
Years we have said
they come back and the regulation just
back to work.
Slams, bam. And then when you go and try to get crypto, because your mom's going to get it, they're going to get it from Fidelity or from Wells Fargo, from whatever. And then when you actually look at ARK and Cathie Wood and you look at the poor Ripple guys, they're going to say, oh, well, now, because we've waited long enough, we have precedent. We have precedent as to what an ETF application needs to look like because we've already accepted the provisional for BlackRock. It'll probably kick Cathie Wood and 21 and Wisdom Tree down even further out. And now Ripple XRP, well, God, guys, we're doing an appeal for your ruling that said that you guys were cool, but you're not cool anymore because now you are a security, 100%, because there's an exchange-traded fund, and an ETF is what you were selling Ripple XRP as on exchanges. And Bitcoin's a commodity. Look, the CTF's right here.
They already fined you for it.
The FCC's right here, and they say you're everyone. We already know who you are. So I mean, look, maybe Garlinghouse gets off with a fine, and avoids jail time, or maybe Gary Gensler just hires him and he works with Jesse Chang and FedNow, and everyone gets to go back home and do their job. But I'm telling you, the big guy's going to win. That's the smart money. The dumb money is going to be everyone buying these Bitcoin ETFs.
At the end of the day, the federal government is trying to make money, to have a solvent government. I mean, hopefully, pay down some debt. Maybe that's the plan. But either way, keep track of it. Either way, we got to keep track of it on a ledger of some kind. And if we can do that with a FedNow program, then we've got to make sure that everything else is attached to it. You know, almost like, again, the US dollar being the ultimate stable coin. While we talked a lot about the de-dollarization, but the moment that now an ETF is pegged to a US dollar and you're looking at it, you're buying it in the metrics of US dollars, you're converting it back to US dollars. And even if it's ones and zeros hitting my ACH checking account, and even if there's not any dollar bills physically moving in a Wells Fargo truck, it's still going to be called USD when I pay my bills, when I pay my electric bill, when I pay my gas bill, when I pay my water bill, when I pay my mortgage back to the bank. It's going to be in USD. And I think that's another place to go with all of this. Yes, the regulation. Yes, the Capitol Hill and the legislators are looking at this. They got to get everything done. I want to hear your take here in the next few minutes. Take us up through Thanksgiving. We know that these senators are going to get a little bit of a summer break in August here. Maybe not as much as the Europeans, but we know California is already out ahead of the new crypto legislation, so that's got to get rammed through. Political election heating up. Senators get back. Take us up through what has to get done with BlackRock, SEC, Coinbase. What has to get done before Thanksgiving to set us up for that MLK January final deadline? Like, what has to get done? What questions are still out there?
Well, I think that the two big questions for me, well, first of all, in California, Los Angeles public schools start the fall semester on Monday in 2 days. So I actually
Summer
now,
short.
I actually
Back
now
to work.
think summer has just been truncated the way that news cycles are truncated. Now we're rolling. The fact that California felt today secure enough to launch a full update to their entire legislation around how you donate to campaigns, they don't do that often, right? It's not going to get done again in a month because there's new information. So to me, this is already a foregone thing that's been planned, right? So what has to fall, the two things that have to fall between now and Thanksgiving are, number one, the outline of what the BlackRock ETF actually is. And I would even go so far as to say, I think it's going to be available in some way, shape, or form to someone or something. Like maybe it's available to an institution or institutions somehow in advance of the end of the year, and certainly before Thanksgiving. Because as soon as we go to Thanksgiving and by Christmas, some kind of trial something. The same way they did trial periods for the Franklin Project and the this and the that. They're going to start it off because as soon as they say now it's ready for public, and it's going to be around January, February, it will have already had to have been run at least a little bit to kind of know how it's going to work. That's the first thing. And the second thing is the technical side of it, just kind of backing away, is that there's a lot of different pundits in the space, people who look at the technical analysis and the charts. This is getting a little bit scientific about it, but the Bitcoin algorithm, the way it runs where every 4-ish years there is an event that's called the halvening. Literally the halving or halving, it's hard to pronounce, of the amount of Bitcoin that can be mined. So the target date of that, if you're looking at the various expectations of people who analyze the market, is that the halvening is coming right sometime, could be March, April of 2024. Who
if you
knows?
count the blocks on average by day, you can start to get to this point where it's going to reach this next halvening and it becomes increasingly more difficult to mine a Bitcoin. Is that a fair?
That's exactly right. And so that would sort of fall in line with Fink and BlackRock's digital gold, right? His analogy as well. At this date and time, it will become twice as hard to find the gold, right? If you're digging for it somewhere, well, it's going to be twice as hard to find in the ground. If
Supply
you're
and
mining
demand, price goes
demand.
up.
So the price goes up. So 3 times the halvening has happened in the past, and every time it always goes up, and by a lot. And usually it pops by a lot, and then it will retrace and come down by a significant, but then it starts ripping again. Right? That's how you go from 100 and then to 1700 to, and then roughly 30,000, 60,000. These are steps, right? And the step that's after swings down, but it's never lower than the step previous. But until now, because now if there is a Bitcoin ETF, I think the thing that has to be disclosed, and we'll see it, the second thing to look for is once BlackRock has the product in the market, regardless if you and I can get it, but someone can, what's the price point of the Bitcoin ETF? Because Bitcoin ETF is not Bitcoin, you could imagine a scenario where the halvening happens. Instead of Bitcoin going from 30 to 100, or let's just say it goes to 100, Bitcoin goes from 30 to 100K, but the Bitcoin ETF goes from 30K to 35K because the Bitcoin ETF is backed and managed by the real cash of BlackRock, not necessarily the real Bitcoin of BlackRock, because stocks and bonds are traded at whatever value the market will bear. So even if the wild swings happen up and down,
They
you
can
could even
just
imagine them
manage
saying it out of protection for you, the American citizen. We're not going to let you buy it at 100K and have it go to 20. We're going to protect you. You'll just buy it at 35. And we'll keep
They're
you
going to
nice
collect the
and steady.
profit off of that swing, and they're just going to make
And
sure you get just a little bit of 6% growth.
But
I think 6% is the number they say is good, right?
But if exactly, where if you can look at your new Apple card and your Apple savings, and you're going to get a promised 4.8, and then the BlackRock ETF says, hey, we're going to give you a promised 8.6. It's almost double.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you like
Guaranteed.
to do that? And then everyone forgets what the word halvening means, and everyone forgets what cryptocurrency is.
What?
The name Satoshi Nakamoto fades away.
Who?
Bitcoin isn't made of Satoshis. It's
Who?
just parts of
What?
Bitcoins. And you can get it from your pal. It's down here at the Wells Fargo. And he seems nice. You'll just add a little bit into your 401k, and now you have some.
And I click a button and pay my taxes with it? Sweet. That's
so
easy.
So if we're looking for between now and Thanksgiving, number one, does the BlackRock ETF come out, and who does it come out to? And when it does come out, number two, what's the price? Because everyone...
Where do they peg it?
The way that the government talks about protecting us is we do not want, and that quote that I sent you this morning, that quote is literally out of the SEC's decision announcing that, yes, we are going to bring in all the Wall Street giants. We're not going to just limit this to the original applications, which is such a weird article to write because, like, okay, so you're just saying that now just because you're first in line doesn't mean you're first in the door. You just are in a group of people, but you're not first anymore. But the quote is, the SEC's main concern about this ETF is about the potential market manipulation by a big whale. Meaning, today, Elon Musk can go on Twitter, on Platform X, and say all kinds of crazy stuff about Bitcoin and Doge, and the prices can swing up and down, and he's got no penalty because it's not regulated.
Or he can use an AI and a bot to make it pump to whoever he wants it to.
And do whatever he wants. And now what they're saying is, oh, we're going to protect you. But what you're actually saying is the halvening is coming. All these people who've been crypto enthusiasts for 10, 12 years are waiting for this moment to happen. And then when it does happen and the price goes through the ceiling, the fact that the whale, BlackRock in this case, and the federal government are going to manipulate the price and prevent it from being
We're going to buy it all.
We're going to prevent all of these retail citizens becoming millionaires because that's not what the American government wants. They want them to be millionaires, not American citizens. Ultimately, follow the money. So those are the things I'm looking for. I know it's a real dark sky, Chicken Little moment, but look, if Gary Gensler can run around screaming AI, I can run around screaming that BlackRock. It's going to be one of the worst things that's ever happened to Bitcoin.
I think we have to leave it there. We will do it again next week. Stay tuned. Middle of August, deep summer. What's it going to look like? We'll do it again, sir. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you. Talk to you soon.
That's all the time we have for Off the Record, On the Rocks. Join us next week for news and all things crypto. Bring up the house lights. It's last call.